All right, let's just jump right in. You hear it everywhere, right? AI, machine learning, chat GPT, all these terms are just flying around. And honestly, it can get kind of confusing trying to keep them all straight. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through all that noise. We're going to untangle this web of buzzwords and see how everything actually fits together.
So, you've probably wondered, right? What is the real difference here? Is machine learning just another name for AI? And where the heck does deep learning come into play? And then there's generative AI. What's so generative about it anyway? Look, it feels like a puzzle, but stick with me. We're going to solve it together, and by the end, you'll see the whole picture clear as day.
Okay, so to really get our heads around where we are today, we've got to go back, way back. We're going to start with the biggest, oldest idea of them all, the original dream of artificial intelligence itself. So let's start with the big picture. I want you to imagine this giant circle. This circle, this is the entire field, the whole universe of AI. It's the big foundational idea that everything else we're going to talk about fits inside.
So at its heart, what even is artificial intelligence? Well, it's the original big dream, the ambition to create machines that can actually think. The goal has always been to build systems that can learn, that can reason, and figure things out on their own, maybe even one day as well as we can, or better.
And this dream is definitely not new. I mean, way back in the 80s, we had these early versions of AI called expert systems. And the idea was cool. They were supposed to act like a human expert. But here's the catch. They were super rigid. You literally had to program them with thousands and thousands of if this happens, then do that rules. It was clunky. For a long, long time, AI was kind of stuck as this niche research project, always just around the corner. But all that time was absolutely crucial. It was laying the groundwork for what was about to happen. Yeah, that old way of hand-coding every single rule, it just couldn't keep up. The real world is just way too messy and complex for that. So inside that big dream of AI, a totally new, and I mean revolutionary approach started to emerge. And this changed absolutely everything. So inside our big AI circle, a new, smaller circle pops up. This is machine learning. And it's super important to get this. It's not a different thing from AI. It's a specific way of doing AI. And this is the approach that really, really took off around the 2010s.
And this was a complete game changer. I mean, a total shift in how we thought about the problem. Instead of programmers sitting there trying to write a rule for every single possibility, machine learning just flips the script. You just feed the machine a ton of data, and you let it figure out the patterns and the rules all by itself. And that's what lets it make its own predictions. So how does that even work? How does it learn? Well, let's make it super simple. Imagine you show a computer a pattern. Square, circle, square, circle. You just keep showing it that over and over again. Every time it sees the sequence, it gets a little more certain that it's spotted the pattern. So if I asked you, what comes next? You'd say, a square, right? Of course you would. And that's exactly what a machine learning model does. It's not magic. It's just using all the data it's already seen to make a really, really good guess about what's coming. That's prediction, right there. But then what if this shows up? A triangle. Whoa. It completely breaks the pattern. And this shows us another superpower of machine learning, spotting the weird stuff, the outliers. It can basically throw up a red flag and say, hey, wait a second, this doesn't fit. And you can imagine how powerful that is for things like credit card fraud or cybersecurity. Anywhere you're looking for that one strange thing that just isn't right. Okay, so we have our big AI circle. And inside that, we have machine learning. But what happens when the patterns get way more complex than just squares and circles? I mean, what if you're trying to teach a computer the difference between a picture of a cat and a picture of a dog? For that, we had to go even deeper. And that brings us to our next circle. So tucked inside machine learning, there's an even more powerful technique, deep learning. And this is where it gets really cool, because scientists started looking at the best computer they knew, the human brain. Yeah, deep learning is literally inspired by our own brains. It uses these really complex things called neural networks, and they're basically designed to copy the way our own brain cells, our neurons, are all connected. The whole point is to get machines to process information in a way that's a little more, well, human. So why do they call it deep? Well, it's because these neural networks have layers, lots and lots of layers. Data goes in the first layer, the input layer. Then it passes through all these hidden layers in the middle, and each layer looks for something different, getting more and more complex as it goes, before it spits out an answer at the output layer. All those layers let it find incredibly subtle patterns. But it also creates this thing people call the black box problem, where the system is so complex, sometimes even its own creators can't tell you exactly how it got the answer it did.
All right, and that brings us to the final layer, the one that blew everything wide open. The breakthrough that took AI from being something in a lab to something, well, something in the hands of millions of people, practically overnight. So here it is, our final circle, sitting right inside deep learning. This is the latest and by far the most explosive development of all, generative AI. Yep, this is the world of things like ChatGPT and all those large language models you've been hearing about. So what's the big deal? What does generative even mean? Well, it means it doesn't just analyze or predict. It creates. It generates brand new stuff. Think of it like autocomplete on your phone, but on steroids. Instead of just guessing the next word, a large language model, or LLM, can predict the next sentence, the next paragraph. Heck, it can write a whole book. It's just a massive, massive leap forward. And this is the tech that powers all the wild stuff we're seeing now. You know, chatbots you can have a real conversation with, tools that can summarize a huge report in like 2 seconds. It's even the stuff behind new music, new art, and yeah, even deep fakes that can mimic someone's voice and face. But this brings up a really interesting question, doesn't it? Is this stuff truly creative, or is it just, mashing up and rearranging all the stuff it was trained on? I love this music analogy to think about it. Look, all the musical notes in the world already exist, right? There's only so many. But we don't say it's impossible to write a new song. Composers just take those same notes and arrange them in new, beautiful ways. And in a way, that's what generative AI is doing. It's using its building blocks, all that data, to build something that feels brand new. So there you have it. We've gone from this huge, decades-old dream of AI all the way down to this incredibly powerful, specific explosion of generative tech. So the big question is, what happens now? Well, for decades, AI was kind of slow going. You can see it here. Machine learning and deep learning, they gave it a nice bump. But then generative AI showed up, and adoption just went ballistic. I mean, it went straight to the moon. Why? Because for the first time, it was easy for anyone to use. That accessibility changed everything. And that's the whole story. See? It's not a bunch of random competing buzzwords. It's a story of evolution. It all started with the big dream, artificial intelligence. Inside that, a better approach emerged, machine learning. We made that even more powerful with deep learning. And that's what gave us the generative AI explosion we're all seeing right now. So, I want to leave you with this one final thought. The technology can now generate pretty much anything we ask it to. The old barriers of, can a machine do this? They're just falling away one by one. So the really important question for all of us is no longer can they create, it's what should we ask them to create? And that, right there, is both the biggest challenge and the most incredible opportunity we're facing. Thanks for watching.